Some places whisper. Colorado does not speak through the polished lines of guidebooks or the smiling faces on postcards. It murmurs from cracks in abandoned walls, from doorways that never stay shut, from the silence that feels like it is watching you. It is not the beauty that stays with you here, not the mountain air or the endless skies. It is the things you were never meant to notice, the moments too strange to be written down, the stories buried in static, in splintered wood, in the uneasy certainty that someone has been standing just outside your window longer than you realized. Tonight, you will hear them. The stories Colorado does not want to be remembered. The ones that stretch across decades, vanish without explanation, and sometimes return when you think they are gone. They are not legends told around campfires, not exaggerated ghost tales for tourists. They are documented, whispered, and in some cases, lived. And once you hear them, you cannot unhear them. So lock your doors, dim the lights, put on your headphones if you dare, and pull the blanket tight, because the next hour will leave you looking at Colorado in a way you never have before. After this, you will wonder if the mountains are just scenery, or if they have been watching you all along. It begins in a valley where the horizon stretches forever, where shadows move even when nothing else does, and where the night carries more than the sound of the wind. A place where cattle vanish without a sound, where doors swing open without force, and where, for over a decade, an unseen presence waited for the right moment to make itself known. They called it the San Luis Valley Stalker. But even that name is too human, too small for something that felt older, quieter, and far more patient. Mystery number 1. The San Luis Valley Stalker. The San Luis Valley is vast and silent, a high-altitude desert ringed by the jagged ridges of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. From a distance, it looks endless, a flat expanse where the horizon seems to fold into the sky. But to those who lived there in the late 1980s, that silence was not empty. It was watching. It began, as so many unsettling stories do, with something small, just a door. In October of 1986, rancher Walt Jeff woke to find his front door standing wide open in the pale morning light. He swore he had locked it the night before. The sheriff's deputies who came to check could find no sign of tampering, no broken hinges, no marks on the frame. Only one detail. Unsettled Walt the inside handle was cold to the touch, as if someone had stood there, hand pressed against it before leaving it ajar. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, something was gone. Not valuables, not tools. Just a single boot from the porch and one of his chickens. No blood, no feathers, no tracks in the dirt. Walt bought a shotgun. He chained the door. But the following month, the chain hung loose, perfectly unlatched, as if whatever had entered wanted him to know locks meant nothing. Soon, others whispered similar stories. A mother in Manassas jolted awake to her baby's cries, only to discover the monitor had gone dead. When she opened the nursery door, the window stood cracked open. She lived alone. No prints, no draft. Just the unbearable certainty that something had been in the room with her child. She packed her belongings and left 2 days later. In Center, Colorado, a teenage girl pressed her face against the glass of her second-floor window and found, smeared on the outside, a single handprint too large to be her own. A teacher in Del Norte swore he heard slow, steady breathing beneath his porch when no one was there. At a lonely gas station, a clerk swore she glimpsed a pale face reflected in the security glass. But when she turned, there was no one standing behind her. The reports multiplied. By the early 1990s, the sheriff's department had more than 20 accounts from towns scattered across the valley. Always the same. No forced entry, no theft, nothing touched but doors, windows, and the faint impression that something had been standing very close. One woman described it best. It was not like someone had been in my house. It was like they never left. And then, in 1992, the presence revealed itself in a way that no one could explain. A couple in the small town of Hooper had just installed motion lights on their porch. One night, the sensor tripped. They looked outside, nothing, but the lights stayed on. The next morning, they checked the tape. At 2:11 a.m., the feed glitched for 4 seconds. When the picture returned, their porch chair was gone. Vanished. They found it the next morning, upright, 40 feet away in the middle of a barren field, turned to face the house as if someone had been sitting in it all night. By 1994, the stories had turned darker. A camper near Zapata Falls never came home. His car remained locked, his gear untouched, but his tent zipper was pulled open, and his boots lined up neatly by the flap, as though someone or something had carefully removed them while he slept. Search dogs picked up a trail that led 300 yards before vanishing into nothing. The scent simply ended. Locals whispered the name, now in hushed tones, the Stalker. Not a man, not an animal, but something that moved only when you were not looking, that never made a sound, and never left evidence behind. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. By 1997, the reports ceased. No more missing objects, no more open doors, no more faces glimpsed in glass. Silence returned to the valley. But silence does not always mean absence. In 2016, a family from out of state moved into a ranch house 6 miles north of Alamosa. Within 2 weeks, they had already changed the locks. Their son had found the dog kennel open one morning, the latch unhooked. Their dog sat outside unharmed, staring into the tree line as though waiting for someone to return. That same night, the father woke at exactly 6 a.m. to the sound of 3 slow knocks. They were not at the front door or the window. They came from inside the closet. He opened it. Nothing. Just air so cold it made his breath fog in the dark. The light bulb above his head flickered once, then burst, showering the floor with glass. Even now, the valley looks empty, sun-scorched plains, abandoned barns, a sky wider than belief. But if you stand too long by a window without curtains, if you leave your boots out overnight, if you ever hear a knock from a door that should be silent, do not answer. Some things in the mountains are patient, some are still waiting, and sometimes, when you are quiet enough, you realize the silence is not yours at all. Mystery number 2, the Twin Lakes Lodge tape. Silence in the valley does not end at the fence line. It follows you north into the higher country, where the air thins, the trees tighten around the road, and the water turns to a sheet of cold glass that reflects the mountains like an eye. Twin Lakes looks peaceful from a distance, alpine stillness, that postcard calm. But there are places the map forgets on purpose, and one of them once stared through a cracked window at anyone foolish enough to press play a second time. They did not call it anything official. Locals just said the lodge, the way people name something they wish would stay a rumor. It had no sign. It stood back from the curve in the gravel road. People called the curve that disappears, where the bend hides you from both approaches, swallowed by pine. By the early 2000s, snow had buried the stairwell each winter, and wind had torn the siding to gray ribbons. A rowboat, half frozen into the lakeshore like a forgotten rib, pointed at the tree line as if it were trying to remember where it came from. In 2003, an urban explorer named Darren Blake heard the story from a snowplow worker in Leadville, who'd run routes up there since the late 80s, go past the frozen rowboat. Follow the packed snow until the slope turns quiet, then look for a door without a knob. If you can get in, bring a flashlight. Don't touch the shelf. If you find a tape, play it once, then leave. Darren walked it in daylight, boots crunching through a crust that swallowed him up to the ankles whenever the wind shifted. The lodge was not a lodge anymore. No check-in desk. No register bell, just a weather-caved roofline and a smell that lived between mildew and cold iron. Inside, a broken stove belly up like a dead animal, a collapsed chair, drifts of plaster dust glittering in his flashlight beam. Upstairs, the hall narrowed like a throat. At the end, a door sat where a number should have been, stripped of its knob, held shut by a rusted padlock that had already given up once before. He pried, and the wood sighed. A narrow room, a plywood shelf, dust like ash. And on the wall, a line scratched by something sharper than a key. Play it once, then leave it. The tape had no label, no handwritten note, just black plastic gone soft along one edge, as if it had been left too close to heat. He pocketed it and drove back to Denver with the heater off, feeling. He would later tell the lab tech that the passenger seat was occupied by something that did not want to fog the glass. A university film lab agreed to help. Old equipment. A patient technician who still knew how to thread a cassette and coax signal out of ghosts. They rolled it. Static, then snowfall. A fixed camera angle looking through a cracked window. Wind flung white sideways across the glass, but the room on their side was still no creaks. No shift in exposure, The timestamp stuttered but settled. January 17th, 1997. The shot held. 6 minutes of nothing but the inside of a winter, and the feeling that the lens was not the only thing looking. At the 4-minute mark, something moved behind the glass. Not quickly. Not a shape you could outline. Just a tall impression against the storm, wrong with the wind, as if the gusts had forgotten it was there and passed through. At 6:42, a voice not from the room, not from the storm, threaded through the tape's own hiss, in a half-whisper that seemed to land next to the ear instead of in it. Don't rewind. A breath. Then, the unfinished thought that followed like a chill. It remembers. Black. They stored the tape. Darren did not sleep. 2 days later, curiosity or something closer won. He brought it back to the lab. The tech swore as soon as the wheels spun that the audio track was wrong, like it had been stretched and bruised. They watched anyway. Snow. Window. Crack. Same timestamp. But in the final 5 seconds, the view shifted without a cut. As if the camera had somehow stepped outside, the window from the other side now, and a plane of glass reflecting a room they knew and did not know. And there, just beyond the cracked corner where the frost had crawled, someone looking in. No face. Just the geometry of a person where a person should not be. The lab's exit sign flickered. The power did not fail. The tape stopped itself. They tried to digitize it. The archive logged 7 attempts across 6 machines. Each transfer failed differently. Checksum errors, audio desyncs, a mysterious file that burned a disk as a perfect blank until the department head wrote a note on the case sleeve. No further attempts. Storage only. The oddest thing was not the failures. It was the way the timecode drifted to match the clock on the wall, as if the cassette disliked being measured by anything but the current room. In 2005, the lab screened it for a class as a demonstration in media decay. That is how it should have ended, a cautionary tale about old formats. Instead, the room turned small. 4 students later submitted written reports describing details no one else saw. One swore the tall shape waved. Another heard a second voice beneath the first. We are watching 2 layered like a reflection behind glass. A third saw a hand on the window from the inside, prints blooming and evaporating in the frost. A fourth wrote only, "It looked at the camera. I do not think it was outside." 2 hard drives on the lab bench failed that night in different ways. One student lost hearing in her right ear for an afternoon, like pressure on a plane that never popped. The professor signed the screening log, left the building early, and within the month left the university entirely. He moved out of Colorado and never taught again. Sometime in 2010, the shelf in the archive still had its label. The case did not. No broken lock, no misplaced barcode, no form filled out in a hurry. The inventory was simply wrong. By 1, the librarian wrote "missing" in pencil and underlined it twice. The pencil mark faded before the ink and other entries did, as if the word did not want to stay. People will tell you there was never a lodge there, not a proper one, not with guests. They will say the footprint in the forest was probably an old service building or a hunter's shelter, gone to rot and wind. They will tell you storms in January make sounds that would trick any recorder, and that the human brain draws faces where it wants to find them. Maybe all of that is true. The lake does clever things with light at dusk. The pines sound like whispering when the snow runs through them. But talk to the ones who remember that winter who had to dig out their doors after the snow of '97, and they avoid the curve in late light. They do not fish that side when the ice is thin enough to hold memory and too thick to break. One retired plowman refuses to turn around at the end of that road. He reverses, slow and cautious, eyes on the rear view, because the first time he spun his truck to point for home, the mirror filled for a second with a window he was not parked near. You can go up there if you like. Follow the lakeshore until the trees harden into a wall and the trail loses its own footsteps. You won't find a sign. The rowboat's gone under. The foundation stones have been shouldered aside by root and frost. There is nothing left to mark where a door used to be, except the way the wind stumbles there, like it is learning a word it forgot. And if you feel, for just a moment, the sensation that you are being watched from the other side of a glass that is not there, do not look for a building. Buildings leave timbers, nails, and stains in the floorboards. This leaves only attention. The mistake was never finding the tape. The mistake was thinking it wanted to be watched once. It wanted to be watched again. It wanted to know who was willing to disobey a sentence scratched in a wall. And when people did, it learned the room. That is why some say it changed the frame, the angle, the timing. Because it began to remember the watchers back. We left the valley with something patient still listening behind closets. At the lake, we found a film that could look into the present if you gave it a second chance. But the oldest buildings in Colorado do not need film to hold a presence. Some of them have doors that were never really closed. A seam in the wall where a room decided to keep getting ready, night after night, for a curtain that never fell. Mystery number 3, the hidden room of Hotel Colorado. Not every door is built to be opened. Some are built to be forgotten, painted into the wall and left to wait for someone curious enough or unlucky enough to notice the seam. In Glenwood Springs, the Hotel Colorado stands with the kind of grandeur that makes tourists lower their voices. Stone towers and carved balconies look down over quiet streets. Fireplaces glow in the lobbies, and history lingers in every hallway. Presidents stayed there, soldiers returned there, criminals hid there, but not all of them left. On the 3rd floor, where the wallpaper does not match and the sound of water runs without a faucet, there is a door that does not belong. It has no number, no peephole, no entry on the guest map, just a brass knob dulled with age, set into a frame that looks as though it should not be there at all. Guests pass it without noticing. Staff pretend not to see it. But when the lights go quiet, when the hour stretches thin, the door makes itself heard. In 2004, a couple staying in room 312 complained of a brushing sound against the wall. Not scratching. Not knocking, brushing, slow and deliberate, as if someone were combing their hair in long strokes over and over. The electricity had cut during a storm, but the sound went on. When the wife finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, she woke to see her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Except for a second, the reflection was not hers. The hair was longer, darker, and it smiled. She left the hotel the next morning and never came back. What the couple did not know was that the door once had a number. In the 1930s, the Glenwood Springs Historical Society listed the space as Room 311. A name was tied to it, Evelyn Vale. A stage actress, she was known for her red velvet gowns, her black hair, and her ritual of preparing for the stage for hours before each performance. But in 1937, Evelyn stopped preparing. She simply vanished. No note, no train ticket. Her clothes hung untouched in the closet. A hairbrush sat waiting on the vanity. The hotel sealed the room 3 weeks later. A handwritten maintenance log survives from that year. One entry reads, "Mirror cracked inside. Sounds continue at night. Removed bulb. Light still comes on." After that, the pages thin out. The door was painted to match the wall, but the wall never quite matched. Years later, in 1991, a night auditor watching the monitors saw the hallway lights flicker at 3:14 a.m. The motion sensors triggered nothing, but the security footage showed a shadow gliding across the carpet where no one walked. The next morning, the front desk phone had a voicemail, though no guest had access to the line. A woman's voice whispered, "I am not ready yet. Come back later." Hotel staff learned to stop talking about it. When guests asked, they said the sound was pipes, that the wall was hollow, that the blueprints had always shown a blank space there. But a housekeeper who worked that floor in 2007 kept a diary. In one entry she wrote, "The hallway was empty, but I heard footsteps and heels. Old ones. The kind they do not make anymore." She quit a week later. Today, the door is still there, unmarked, silent during the day. But the stillness is thin, like stage curtains drawn tight before they part. Stand in the hallway late enough, you might hear humming, the faint snap of a light turning on when no bulb should glow, the sound of a chair scraping across a floor no one has walked in 80 years. If you find yourself staring at the door, wondering whether to try the knob, do not, because Evelyn Vale is still getting ready. She is been brushing her hair for decades, waiting for an audience, waiting for the curtain to rise. And she does not want anyone to interrupt before she is finished. We left Twin Lakes with a tape that remembered its viewers. In Glenwood Springs, we find a room that refuses to forget its guest. But sometimes, memory itself is not enough. Sometimes the land stops, the clock stops, and for a few impossible seconds, the world itself refuses to move forward. and on a rust-colored slope above Carbondale, Colorado, time once froze just long enough for everyone who saw it to know they would have been left behind. Mystery number 4. The Red Hill Flash. Red Hill does not look like the kind of place where time could break. Just a rust-colored ridge rising out of Carbondale, popular with hikers who climb its switchbacks for a clean view of Mount Cypress. From the town below, the slope looks harmless, a streak of red earth against the sky. But on one warm night in 1979, that hill glowed from the inside, and for 11 seconds everything on the ground stopped. Everything except the sky. It was just after 9 of the clock on August 3rd when Charles Newell, a science teacher at the local high school, took his dog up the trail. The air was dry, the stars bright, the trail so familiar he could have walked it blind. Halfway up, the dog froze, muscles stiff, ears forward, as though the night had suddenly learned a new language. And then the slope lit up. Not lightning, not fire. A steady, blood-tinted flash, bright but without heat, silent but alive. Charles later said it was not light shining on the hill. It was as if the hill itself was burning from within, a deep red pulse that bled through the soil. For 11 seconds, everything around him held still. The dog did not blink. His watch stopped. The wind died. Even the crickets froze mid-song. But above him, the clouds kept moving. Stars kept sliding across the sky. Time was fractured, flowing in the heavens, but locked on the earth. And then, as suddenly as it began, darkness returned. The dog stumbled forward. Charles felt blood trickle from one nostril, and his watch restarted exactly 11 seconds. Late, he told the sheriff the next morning. At first, no one believed him, until the phone calls started. 6 others from scattered elevations around Red Hill phoned in that night with the same story. Clocks stopping, lights bending, silence hanging thick in the air. One woman said her wall clock froze for 12 seconds, though the power never failed. Another swore her porch lights shone without casting shadows, as if the glow did not know where to fall. None of them knew each other. None had been on the hill. In 1980, a visiting engineer from Boulder decided to test it. He camped near the midslope with magnetometers, infrared cameras, and clocks he wound by hand. For 4 nights, nothing. Then, on the 5th, just before 3 in the morning, the air dropped cold enough to frost his breath. The instruments spiked. His camera lens fogged, as though touched from inside. On the audio tape, beneath the hiss of static, came a single word, spoken low enough to sound like it rose from beneath the dirt, below. He returned the next day to find his batteries drained, his notes torn down the center. Only one thing remained untouched. A sticky note taped to his car windshield. In uneven handwriting, read is not just the soil. He packed and never came back. Stories piled up in the years after. A teenager's camera shutter opened on its own, capturing stars on the ground instead of in the sky. Hikers said the trail felt longer on the way down than on the way up, as if the hill refused to let them go without a toll. One visitor recorded himself on his phone just after sunset. Later, when he played it back, he heard his own voice whispering, "I am not facing the right way." He swore he had never said the words. No official report explained it. No satellite caught it. No solar flare aligned with the timing. Scientists dismissed it as folklore, a trick of perception. But those who saw the glow knew better. They still avoid Red Hill at dusk, especially near the overlook where Charles's dog first froze. Because the thing about time is simple. When it stops, something else is moving in its place. Some lights reveal what you were never meant to see. Some lights erase. But that red flash left something behind, waiting. And if it comes again, the sky won't be the only thing still moving. We left Glenwood Springs with a door that never forgot its guest. Here, time itself stumbled and left a scar in the dirt. And just a few miles deeper into the range, in a town nearly erased by snow and silence, one hotel room is still waiting for its occupant to finish packing. Room 6 has been locked for half a century, but the man inside never left. Mystery number 5. The Man in Room 6. St. Elmo is called a ghost town, but that is not quite true. The wooden storefronts still stand, their porches creaking when the wind drags through. The old general store still opens its doors to tourists who want to touch history. But across the street, the Miners' Rest Hotel waits in a different kind of silence. It closed its books in the mid-1970s, Stop taking guests. Stop serving meals. Yet locals say one room never closed. Room 6. No one cleans it. No one carries luggage across its threshold. The last key disappeared before most of the town's residents were even born. And still, something there refuses to leave. In January 2001, a snowstorm pushed a plow driver named Raul Torres off the road and into the hotel's hollow lobby. He had grown up near the town and knew the place was abandoned. But the storm howled too hard to risk the mountain passes. He built a small fire in the dead hearth and stretched out on the dusty floor. Around 2:30 a.m., he woke to footsteps overhead. Slow, pacing. There was only one room left above that part of the building. Room 6. Raul carried his flashlight up the staircase, the beam carving a pale tunnel through the dark. The hallway was thick with dust, untouched, except at the very end where the door stood cracked open. Inside, a bare desk, a single chair, and a bulb that glowed even though the hotel had no electricity. For a split second, Raul swore a man stood in the corner with his back turned, face to the wall, body rigid like a shadow pinned in place. The bulb flickered, popped, and the room was empty. Raul did not sleep inside after that. He waited out the storm on the porch with his truck idling, headlights fixed on the snow, daring dawn to come. But Raul's story was not the first. In 1962, a honeymooning couple stayed in room 6 when the Miners' Rest was still open. Their journal, now locked in the Leadville Museum, has one strange entry: floor creaks below us, but there is nothing under the floor, just air. The next page is torn clean out. The page after carries only one line. He knocks 3 times. We are not supposed to answer. The hotel owners tried to reclaim the room in the 70s. They tore at the floorboards, but the wood seemed soft from the inside, pulsing as though something underneath was alive. They sealed it with boards and paint. By 1988, 2 amateur ghost hunters broke in with a tape recorder. They left it running all night. When they played it back, 5 hours of static gave way to a moment at exactly 3:07 a.m. 3 knocks. A pause. Then a man's voice, low and tired. I am not done packing. No suitcase was ever found. No guest was registered. The hunters left the recorder on the chair. It was never seen again. Today, room 6 is invisible to most visitors. No number on the frame, no knob on the door, just a blank seam at the end of the corridor. But hikers who linger outside the Miners' Rest swear they have seen a light flicker in the upstairs window, always the same one. Sometimes, if you are bold enough to knock 3 times on the wall where the door used to be, you will hear someone knock back. Not quick, not angry, just a rhythm that feels like waiting. Some ghosts scream for attention. Some chase you down hallways. But the man in room 6 does not rush. He has been waiting since 1959, caught between leaving and arriving, caught in the act of never finishing what he started. And if you listen too long, if you wait for the knock to come again, you might understand what he is still packing for. We left Red Hill with time itself stuttering into silence. Here, one man's unfinished departure lingers in wood and dust. But higher in the Rockies, where towers were built to broadcast warnings across frozen ridges, something else kept speaking long after it was supposed to be shut down. Its pulse still cuts through the ice, steady and patient. And every 61 seconds, it reminds the mountains that something is still listening. Mystery number 6, the tower that never shut off. On the northern edge of the Colorado Rockies, just west of Rabbit Ears Pass, there is a ridge where the snow lies heavy and the air thins to a glassy stillness. In 1984, an emergency broadcast tower was built there, a steel skeleton wired to send out avalanche alerts and fire warnings. For decades, its pulse reassured backcountry travelers that the mountains were being watched. In 2017, the tower was shut down, stripped, and declared redundant. The power lines were cut, the batteries removed. It should have gone silent forever, but it did not. In November of 2020, a team of snow surveyors began picking up interference on their emergency band radios. A low pulse, 3 beats, a pause, 3 more, then static. Exactly every 61 seconds. They traced it through the storm, up the ridge, and found the source, the dead tower. Its dish sagged under ice, its hatch hung ajar. but the pulse was alive. Engineers in Fort Collins studied the recording. The file was clean too clean. No overlap with military frequencies, no bleed from geological equipment. But when they ran the audio through spectral analysis, faint tones emerged between the pulses, distorted and fractured like Morse code played backward. One technician mapped the tones, translated them as coordinates, and the coordinates led directly back to the tower itself. In January 2021, an amateur radio enthusiast named Elliot Monroe hiked up with a friend and a drone to see for himself. The snow was waist deep, the wind sharp, but when they reached the tower, the dish was warm to the touch. Warm, though the ridge was 20 degrees below freezing. At the base, a maintenance hatch yawned open. Inside, a dust-choked closet. No wires, no power units, nothing mechanical left behind. And yet the receiver on Elliot's belt screamed the signal was stronger inside the hollow steel shell than it was outside. The air itself seemed to hum, pressing against their lungs like the start of altitude sickness. Elliot recorded 5 minutes of audio and uploaded the raw file online. Within 2 days, his post vanished, his account locked. Those who had already downloaded it reported the same symptoms: headphones buzzing, system clocks resetting to the wrong year, and buried in the left channel, a whisper that said, "We are not in the ice." 2 months later, the ridge was abruptly classified as unsafe avalanche terrain. No reports of slides, no geological shifts. Just a red line drawn across the maps, closing the area to hikers. But word spread. Backcountry skiers reported their avalanche beacons triggering false pings from solid ice. One hiker's GPS insisted he was circling the tower even as he stood miles away. One body cam caught the sound. Just a short burst, but clear. A rhythmic knock, metallic, like steel flexing under pressure. Then a drawn-out exhale, and the start of a word cut short by static. Still, then nothing. Officially, the tower is gone, decommissioned, dismantled in parts. But hikers still glance at their compasses when the clouds move heavy overhead. Some swear the needle stutters. Others claim their radios flicker to life with the old pulse, 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, until they walk past the ridge and the silence returns. Signals are meant to fade. Towers are meant to fall silent. But not this one. Every 61 seconds, the mountains still listen. And whatever is sending that call is not warning anyone anymore. It is calling something home. We left room 6 with a man who never finished leaving. Here, a tower long abandoned keeps reaching out, pulse by pulse, steady as a heartbeat. And if you have followed this far, through the stalkers and tapes, the red flashes and sealed doors, then, Colorado does not just hold on to its mysteries. It feeds them. And now, at the edge of all these stories, the question is not whether they are true. It is whether you will still be able to leave them behind once you have heard them all. Because some stories end when you close the book. These do not. These wait. You have made it through the valley where doors unlatched themselves, through a tape that remembered its watchers, through a room that still hums with the sound of a brush against a mirror. You have stood on a hillside where time froze red for 11 seconds. Walked the hallway of a hotel that sealed a man inside his own unfinished departure, and stood beneath a tower that should have fallen silent but still beats like a heart beneath the snow. These are not campfire stories. They are not legends polished by decades of retelling. They are scattered accounts, half-erased logs, whispered testimony left behind by people who could not explain what they saw but could not forget it either. Colorado does not just hold its ghosts. It erases their names and waits for you to discover them again. And when you do, you realize they have been waiting for you all along. Some mysteries watch. Some record. Some hum, faint but steady, through walls and wires and decades. But all of them share the same truth. Silence here is never empty. When a door opens without reason. When a voice flickers across tape that no longer exists. When a hillside glows from the inside, you are not just witnessing the past. You are stepping into something that does not end, something that keeps going even when you stop looking. So if you visit the San Luis Valley, draw the curtains tight. If you wander the frozen lakes, do not rewind what you find. If you stay in Glenwood Springs, do not knock on the door without a number. And if your compass stutters near Rabbit Ears Pass, do not follow it, Because some signals are not calling you to safety, they are calling you back. This was Colorado. 6 stories too disturbing to stay written, too strange to be dismissed. But the playlist is still open, and if this one found you, another state is waiting. Another door, another room, another silence that is not empty. The only question is, will you answer when it calls?